All right, we're looking at number 14. This is page 3 of your packet, close to the very end. We've got these two. Remember your strategy. First and foremost is going to be to factor denominators. So we're kind of going to ignore numerators and figure out, taking a look at this, what are our common denominators? And to do that, we're going to have to factor. So I've got 4z squared plus 11z minus 3. You are fully aware that you've been told to multiply 4 and negative 3, and that's negative 12 and 11. And you're looking for what are the factors of negative 12 that add up to 11. Hopefully you can figure out that that's 12 and negative 1. Now I factor differently. If there's a pop-up right here, it'll take you to a video that explains this. But basically what I do, don't mess with numerators. 4z minus 1, it's not going to factor at all, so I'm just going to rewrite that. So the left rational expression does not change. On the right, I ignore the numerator again, and I'm going to factor 4z squared minus 11z minus 13. Now, the way that I do this, and I recognize that this might be a little bit different from how you do this, to me this one makes sense more, but I go ahead and write 4z squared and minus 3. But what I do is I decide to rewrite this, because 11z, you could write that as plus 12z minus 1z. And if you added those together, they would, they're like terms, so you would end up with positive 11z. There is a reason that I do this, and that video will show you, but I'm going to write plus 12z minus 1z. Okay, now then, I'm not finished factoring yet. What I'm going to do here is you take it in pairs. This is factoring by grouping. And so the first pair, you look for what is the common factor of 4z squared plus 12z. Well, 4 is the constant, and they both have minimum 1z. So, and you figure out if I pulled a 4z out of both of those, what would I end up with? And you would have a z plus 3. All right, you do the same thing on the second part, and let me zoom way in so you can see this. I've got a negative 1z minus 3. The only common factor is just a negative 1. So I'm going to take a negative 1 out. And when I do, I end up with negative 1 from negative 1z is just z. Negative 1 divided into negative 3 is going to be a plus 3. So I've rewritten this, and I'm just going to kind of mark it out a little bit. I've rewritten the four-termed polynomial as this, 4z times z plus 3 minus 1 times z plus 3. Now, notice you've got a common factor here and here that you can basically undistribute out. Okay, and what that looks like is if you pull a z plus 3 out to the front from both of these, what you end up with is what isn't z plus 3. So it's 4z minus 1. Okay, this is equivalent to the step above it, so I'm going to take this little dealy bob here and mark it out because I'm replacing all two of those, I guess, and if you count the original it would be 3, with this statement. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this as it's 4 over 4z minus 1 plus 8z minus 15 over that factored to z plus 3 times 4z minus 1. Now you play the game of I have, who has, to determine what is the common denominator. So here I've got a 4z minus 1 on the left-hand side and a 4z minus 1 on the right-hand side. That's good. Now then, I've got a z plus 3 on the right-hand side. Everybody has to have the same thing. And so what I've got to do is multiply on the left-hand side by z plus 3 over z plus 3. A complicated form of 1 because anything over itself is 1. But once I do that, now I do have a z plus 3 in that denominator. Scoot this over. So now, once you've done that, you know your common denominator. And it's going to be that z plus 3 times 4z minus 1. So once you've got a common denominator, you just have to do the math on the top. So I'm going to distribute 4 to z and 2 plus 3. So I've got 4z plus 12. And I didn't do anything to the right-hand side, so I'm going to write plus 8z minus 15. Okay, once you have combined the numerators and done that math, you go, well, actually, I haven't finished combining the numerators yet. I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. So I've got 4z plus 8z, which is 12z. And then that's a plus 12 minus 15. So that's going to be minus 3 over z plus 3 times 4z minus 1. And if you take a look at that, I'm looking to see if anything will cancel, but it appears currently it's not going to until I factor the numerator. So you never factor the numerator until the very end, and you leave the denominator factored until after you've done that. So I can see that on this very last thing, if I pulled a 3 out of the numerator, out of both terms, I would end up with a 4z minus 1. And then I'm just going to rewrite this denominator as z plus 3 times 4z minus 1. Okay, now I do have one of those complicated forms of a 1 because 4z minus 1 over 4z minus 1 is 1. That's what canceling means. And so you end up with 3 over z plus 3. Don't cancel those 3's. You never cancel out of addition or subtraction. And that is the simplest answer.